I am going to miss you. All right. I don't have much in the way of announcements as regards to what we had past Sunday. Most of our announcements, most of the stuff that we have is in the bulletin. I'm not going to go through everything that's in the bulletin. We did have a great area-wide devotional Sunday night. Appreciate everybody that brought food or contributed money to purchase food and all that. We had I counted myself 55 without the adults, without our adults and our kids. Now, that's just a quick preacher's count. There may have been more, but it doesn't really matter. The number is not really as important as the fact that we had a great one. Everybody loved the food. They said they're so tired of going and having pizza or spaghetti or lasagna. It seems like they go, and they not a problem with that food, but it was just nice to have some a kind of a different thing, and we always do a really good job with our making them feel welcome. So appreciate everybody that helped out with that. I want to remind everybody of our trunk or treat on the 29th. We've got still have some stuff to sign up for. We're looking forward to having everybody participate. We're looking forward to that. It's always a great event. And just please, if you can, at all help, come out and spend the time. It's 2 hours out of a year that we're going to put this thing on, and we're going to have a good crowd. So you'll have to look at the sign-up sheet. I don't know. It starts before dark. Yeah, I think it's about 3 hours. So we'll get you home. We'll get you home in time for bed. Yeah, well, I understand that completely. Believe me, I'm going to be ready to go home myself. And I know of a lot of people have asked, and we appreciate everybody. I know that people have been saying they've been praying for us. We have found a house. We're going to kind of spring it on everybody, but I'll go ahead and tell you we did find a house, and we're supposed to close on the 10th. So we're looking forward to that. And thank you everybody for your prayers in regards to us finding a place that we can appreciate. It's in Douglasville. It's not that far away. That we found some back roads that get us here fairly quickly. But as soon as we get in and moved in, we're going to have everybody over for a big homecoming for us. So looking forward to that. But appreciate everybody's thinking about us and keeping us in your prayers. The kids are especially anxious to get out there and get their chickens back. So we thought about bringing them with us, but we thought that might not be a good idea. But anyway, thank you so much for that. I haven't gotten any word more about anything in regards to sickness. I know Miss Hazel was supposed to have her surgery, and she came. Yes. As I was saying, I know she was supposed to have her surgery, and she came through that, and it was a success, and exactly what they were, for right now, exactly the results they were hoping for. So please continue to remember her as she recuperates. Mr. Richard told me this afternoon or this evening, whatever you want to call this, he is going to be going in, and they're going to be giving him some shots in the back. Hopefully that will relieve some of the problem that he's having. He's not looking forward to it, and I understand that completely. He's shaking his head. Not looking forward to that, but hopefully, prayerfully, now what we're going to pray for is that this is going to help him. He said today was just a bad day. It really hurting. And I've had this much back problems before, but I know that that is not something that I would wish on anybody. It is a hurtful thing for back problems. So our prayers are continue to be with him. Hopefully these things that they're planning on doing, see what that does, see if they need to do anything else, but hopefully these are going to take care of a lot of his problem. Okay? So we want to remember Brother Richard in our prayers as well. Verlin Grady passed away. We've mentioned him in our prayers. He passed, and I have a link to his final services. I'll put that on our Facebook page. I don't know them off the top of my head, but okay. Tomorrow night is visitation. In case anybody is interested in going, they'll have visitation, and then. But like I said, I'll post that because I can tell you probably forget about it. But continue to remember the family more than anything else. Continue to remember the Grady family, as this was a shock. It was an accident, a freak accident, that unfortunately resulted in his death. It's been a shock to the family. So, yeah, he was a young man. All things considered. Please remember that family, the Grady family, in your prayers. All right. Yes, sir. Okay. Okay. It's going to be an outpatient. Okay. In and out. Should hopefully. Okay. We'll pray for that. Sheila's going to be having, what's it called? A lymphoma. Okay. Going to have a lymphoma removed tomorrow. Okay. Hopefully it'll be an in and out procedure with no complications. So remember Sheila in our prayers as well. So hopefully y'all be taken care of for a while. Hopefully now. We're gonna pray for it anyway. This is what we're hoping for. It's gonna be I tried to call him. Is his phone working? I mean, is he answering his phone? Okay. Because I called a couple of times. I went by and knocked on the door because he wasn't here on Sunday, and you'd asked if anybody could check on him. So I went by, and he wasn't answering the door. So I don't know if he had gone to the doctor or what. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's okay. I'll try. I'm going to try to go by tomorrow. Then I'll try to go by and see him. He's right up the street, so I'll run by and see what's going. See if he needs anything from us, because I know we'd be happy to provide for him. Okay. Well, I might force something on him. Sometimes you have to do that. People think that I don't need any help, and then sometimes you just got to force it on them. So we'll do that. There is something else. I meant to mention this on Sunday. We have the opportunity to expand our ministry at the Peachstone Living Center over off of Austell. That's where we've been taking our soup because we just weren't having a lot of response from the community to come and get soup. We were taking our soup over there. And we've been asked if there would be any desire to expand that ministry. And the preacher from Macklin Road, Caleb Colley, was talking to me about if there's anything in the community we were doing that they might be able to help us with. Not us help them, but them help us. So I made mention of that, and he was very excited about it. So think about this, pray about it, and give me your input. I'd like to hear what everybody's thinking. It's a living center over off of Austell Road. It's run by the county. It's for people who have limited income, very limited income, subsidized housing. And what they do, it's mostly older folks. There's some folks there that may have some, maybe a mental condition that doesn't allow them to get out and they can go do small part-time stuff, but they can't do full-time work. But the county provides them a place to live at a very reduced rate, and then gives them some subsidies in order to live apart, live on their own. But we've been taking soup over there, and I was talking to Miss Kathy Holmes because she was the one that kind of turned us on to that, and she's going to talk to them about what it would take for us to host a devotional, maybe a worship service over for them, and then kind of work that into a ministry. So she's going to find out a little bit more information. But if you would think about it, and just if you have any questions or anything like that, you might think of something that I haven't thought about. And this is not dictating to the congregation. This is more of a what do you think type of thing. So just think about that. Now I'm going to announce it again on Sunday so that we can get a little. Through that thing, they were looking for a way because they are looking for an opportunity to evangelize in the community, and this is a good evangelism possibility. You bring people food, soup for the soul is what we called it in the first place. So it may. Yeah. Ann Wesley lost another cousin in Alabama. Did she go home? Okay. She's burned up the roads between here and then over the last couple of months. Don't blame her. All right, we need to remember Ann Wesley. She lost another cousin in Alabama. All right. Anything else? All right, let's go ahead and have a prayer. Father in heaven, we're thankful for the day, and we're thankful for many blessings, the blessings of the day, and we thank you, Lord, for the food that we eat. We're thankful for the houses that we live in, clothes that we wear, and all good things that we know come from you. Pray, Lord, your blessing on those that we've mentioned this evening, those who are sick, those who are recovering from sickness, those who are undergoing procedures. We especially ask that you be with Brother Richard and Sheila as they're going to be having procedures done within this month, and we pray, Lord, that these are going to be successful and they can relieve some of the problems that they're having with their health. We ask your blessings on those who've lost loved ones, especially Sister Ann, as she's lost yet another cousin, another family member in Alabama, and we pray, Lord, that you be with her and sustain her, and Lord, help us to reach out to her in a loving way. We're thankful, Lord, for the good news for so many that have regained their health, and we're thankful for your hand in that. We pray, Lord, that you continue to bless them with recovery. We're thankful, Lord, that you bestow upon us the blessings that you do. We're thankful for our opportunities here. We're mindful of the things that we have coming up, the ladies' breakfast and the trunk or treat that we're going to be putting on for the community, and we pray, Lord, that these are successful outreach. We're thankful, Lord, for all that you do for us. We're thankful for your word. It's through Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes chapter 7. And we were talking last week in a pretty simple question. What happens when we have vision without wisdom? And we discussed this. And we have various things occur when we have vision without wisdom. When you set forth on an idea or a job and you don't have wisdom, but foresight, it doesn't get done. And we talked about the proverb or the parable, more of a proverb than a parable from Christ, who spoke about the concept of a man who wants to build a tower. And if he goes out and builds his tower, but he hasn't put the foresight into it to determine whether he has what he needs to finish the job, it's going to fall apart. Not the tower, but the plan. You know, you're going to get into it and you're not going to get where you want to go. You know, the idea that the people of the time had a vision when they were going to build that large tower, the Tower of Babel, a long time ago, but they didn't have wisdom. They had a vision. We want to build this great thing so that we can reach up into the heavens. We can get closer to God. And God said, no, that's not what I want. You can get closer to me by doing what I want you to do. And their wisdom wasn't there. And we know that because they had this vision without wisdom, God stymied them. He kept them from doing what it was that they decided they wanted to do. And he caused them to disperse. That's where we find that in the Bible. All right, so vision without wisdom, unfinished projects, unfinished goals. You can't finish the race without wisdom, right? You can't. We talked about, you know, when you want to run a marathon, say, you know, you want to run a 30K or whatever it is that runners do, you know, wisdom would tell you, what do you need to do? Practice, right? Eat right. You get yourself in shape. You get a good night's rest. You don't start the day with milk and donuts if you're going to run a race. That's not very wise, right? It's going to happen. You're going to throw up halfway down the block. You're going to wish that your wisdom had come into play and you'd done what you're supposed to do to get further along down the road. Okay. Talked about what should the Christian's attitude be towards the day. This is the day that the Lord hath made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. Do we as Christians, is it a good idea to constantly look backward? Or do we look forward? You know, okay? That's part of the vision aspect of it, right? We need to have vision. You know, we need to look down the road and see what can happen. But when we look backwards, what do we always want to do? We always want to compare what we have now to what was back then. It's very different. We need to be very careful about that, because what we always want to do is we want to go to a certain extent back and say, well, right here is really where, you know, I wish it was like it used to be. Well, a lot of things that were in the good old days weren't quite so good, were they? There's a lot of stuff back in the day that while we look at some of the good things, we overlook some of the negative things that we had, right? I mean, think about Yep. Yeah. We had all kinds of things that weren't quite so good back in the good old days. Now, some of the things were good. there were some things about it that were, at least with rose-colored glasses, we look back at things were better. It seemed that anyway, maybe we had a little bit more respect for authority. Maybe we had a little bit more decency towards one another. And that some of that might just be because we just want to remember things the way that we want to remember them. We kind of gloss over the bad and bring back the good. Everybody thinks their own generation's music is the best. Anything before that was nonsense. Everything after that was nonsense. Well, that's our personal opinion more than anything. All right, so let's move on a little bit further. All right, who has Ecclesiastes chapter 7? If you have it, raise your hand. All right, Miss Silva, would you please read verse 11 and 12? Okay. All right, let's look at a few points here. Got a couple of verses we can look at here. What kind of protection is given by wealth? Is there protection that's given by wealth? Yeah. Yeah, you have to say yes. There are certain protections that are given by wealth. A lot of times we think of the idea of legal protections. People who are wealthy tend to, at least it seems anyway, tend to avoid jail time or avoid a lot of legal entanglements that maybe people without means kind of fall into. The people who are wealthy can afford a decent attorney to maybe protect them and defend them in cases, whereas somebody who's not has to rely on a public defender who may not be he may have just graduated from legal, from law school, and maybe has just gotten their shingle and they're just new to the game. And that's true. That's one aspect of it. I think a lot of times that's what we think of when we think of wealth as giving us a little bit of an advantage. But what else? Do wealthy people tend to eat better? Yeah, wealthy people tend to eat better. What else? Yeah. Yeah. If there's an experimental drug, they can have access to some things that maybe the rest of us don't have access to. That's certainly a portion of it. But what else? There's a couple things that are given by wealth. All right, let me ask you this. Let's drop back a little bit further and say, what is the advantage that wisdom has over wealth? If you have the two, what's the advantage that wisdom has over wealth? We talk about the idea of wealth that has its advantages, but what kind of advantage does wisdom have over wealth? Okay, and what does that mean? It's what the verse says, and so it's true, but what? Do people who have wisdom, do they have a better understanding about what helps them to live longer and what extends the life? Yeah, I would say so. I would say that would have a little bit to do with it. We know not to entangle ourselves. People who are wise know not to entangle themselves, inject themselves into things that they have no business in. Yes, ma'am. No, and you're right. We talked about that last week. How many people grow up and they inherit wealth, they have wealth thrust upon them at an early age, and they've lived their entire lives with that wealth, but they don't have the wisdom to contain it, to hold it. Those riches just sort of slip. And this is a perfect example. A perfect example is the parable of the prodigal son. That young man left home with a pocket full of money. He said, he has a wealthy father. He says, I want my portion of the inheritance. And the father didn't hold anything back. He actually dipped into a little bit of his own so that the son could have the inheritance that he was entitled to. I want it now. And he says he went away to a far country. And what does it say he did there? Did he say he invested it wisely and lived a healthy and wealthy life for the rest of his life? No. He squandered it. Why did he squander it? He had friends. And friends who were as callow and as shallow and as superficial as he was. They were ignorant. Not stupid, but they were ignorant. They were young people who did not have the sense yet that comes from being older and having wisdom. So what did he do? He spent it. I had friends that were that way. They got a job. Every paycheck was gone within 48 hours because they wanted to go out and they wanted to be a big shot. Now, they did stuff like going to clubs and having big parties at their house, and it wasn't enough just to grill some hot. You've got to have steaks and all this kind of stuff, and we got to spend it on booze, and booze costs money. So here they go. I mean, their paycheck's gone. There's no wisdom there. They have wealth but not wisdom. And you're right. It doesn't take very long for someone who has wealth but no wisdom to lose it all. There's nothing left. These young guys, there's these young college guys that are signed into the pros. They get this $1 million signing bonus, and then they're guaranteed this. But it all hinges on whether they stay healthy and they play the way they're supposed to. A perfect example is Johnny Manziel from Texas A&M. Touted quarterback. This guy was Johnny Football. He was Mr. Football, and he is washed out of the NFL. He's not even in it anymore. He could not. There was no wisdom, and they were signing him, giving him multi-million-dollar contracts. But he was a foolish young man who had to party and horse around and act foolish, and now he's washed out. I mean, there's not much he can do. Nobody wants to touch him. Who wants a guy that can't keep his mind on the game playing football? So he's unemployable by a football team. And he left early from A&M. He didn't even get his degree. He left early from A&M to go into pro ball. So he doesn't have a degree, and he doesn't have a football career. And nobody wants to hire him. So yes, wealth without wisdom is, we see the end results. And this happens all over the world on a smaller scale. Those are just big name examples. All over the world on a smaller scale, this happens over and over and over and over again. Certainly. Yeah. Rehoboam surrounded himself with foolish young men. And there he was. He had power, but there was no wisdom there. Power and wealth, everything that his father left him, and he really made a hash of things. But yes, absolutely. Wealth without wisdom is I would rather have wisdom without wealth than wealth without wisdom any day of the week. Yeah. If the wisdom's there, or and this is the thing, when wisdom is there, wealth all of a sudden doesn't quite have the draw that it would. You can always make more money, but if you're wise, you realize, I don't necessarily need that in order to be happy in my life. And that's a great thing about wisdom, is it does that for us. It brings that into sharp focus, and it's a good thing. All right, so it says wisdom preserves the life of the one who possesses it. A wise man knows how to lengthen his life by wise living. It begets it. Wisdom begets more wisdom, and it begets more wisdom, and it begets more wisdom. When we're wise and we make good decisions, those good decisions can lead to other good decisions. But it seems like when wealth is there but there's no wisdom, it's like one bad decision just devolves into another. I mean, it's like a trickle-down effect. And all of a sudden this house of cards starts to collapse because there's nothing underneath it. I watched one of those little 30-minute biographies, and it was a guy from the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, MC Hammer. That was his stage name. Probably everybody's heard of him, even if you don't know who he is. This is a guy who at a very young age, I'm talking about like 19, 20 years old, became a multi-millionaire. I mean, this guy was wealthy. And he said, looking back, he said, it seemed like I would make a bad decision. And rather than stepping back and saying, okay, stop. Stop, hammer time. Stop. Let's stop back, let's drop back, and let's look and see what's doing this. He said, it seemed like when I made that bad decision, guess what happened? It seemed like right after that, I made another bad decision. And it just sort of, it was this cascading effect. So does wisdom lead to good decisions, which in turn lead to good decisions? And when we make good decisions, that's wisdom in our pocket. We make that good decision. Oh, that works. I need to remember that. And so forth and so on and so forth. And it just, it kind of becomes in a cycle. We get smarter and smarter and smarter the smarter we do things. So yes, okay. The wise man knows how to lengthen his life by wise living. So we need to remember that rich people don't necessarily live longer. You notice that? If you look, this is when I was studying this, I started making a little bit of an inquiry. Did you know that the longest lived, the centurions on this earth, are typically those who live below the poverty line in the country in which they live, not just compared to the United States, in the country in which they live. But they live below the poverty line. Does that tell you something? You don't necessarily have to be wealthy. Wealth is not something that is necessarily desired in order to live a long, extended life. You look at these people that are 116, 117. This lady that lived in, she lived in Georgia, and I think she passed. It's one thing, you held the title of world's oldest human being. You don't hold it for very long. It goes, and then it goes on to somebody else. But those that have lived that long, you look at them. These are not people who have a huge disposable income. These are people who grew up in some of the toughest times this country's ever seen. You know, you ate whatever you could, whenever you could, because you never knew. So it was a kind of a hard scrabble existence, but they seem to make it just fine. But that happens everywhere, all over the world. Yeah. And part of that comes from wisdom, right? Why are we worried about this? It's whatever's going to happen. I think part of that has to do with the idea of back in those days, there was at least more of a widespread belief in a higher power, one that had control over things, and we weren't as worried about things because we knew that there was something else out there that was watching out after us. Now it's become, the cause of the day is atheism or agnosticism, nihilism, the idea that there's nothing else. And once we leave this world, this world's a hard place, and when we die, there's nothing after that. Well, I mean, that's nihilism. It's not going to get any better. You might as well just accept it. Well, what kind of outlook is that going to bring into our lives? Are we going to? Why would we want to live any longer? Why would we even want to make the effort? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. We did better as a country when we were a little harder and a little leaner. Certainly. What does it say that a major civilization goes through several stages? Prosperity, and then apathy, and then a self-loathing, and then eventually it falls. That happens in every civilization. And I hate to say it, this country's not going to be any different. That's what's going to happen. God has raised up countries, and He's brought them low, and it's going to happen. It's just a matter of how long can we stave it off, and what kind of changes we can make to keep it from going too far south. It's going to happen. But we got to remember that the church is assured something. God's never going to forsake us. So, no. I mean, Solomon's writing this because he knows what's going to happen. What he leaves behind is going to go to someone else, and he says this. He knows what he says. He wasn't talking about his children. He was talking about there's going to come one who I do not know. A foreign neighbor that I do not know is going to come, and they're going to take possession of what's mine. That's exactly what happened. Eventually, Israel fell, and Judah fell. Of course, at this time, it was just Israel. But he knew that eventually this was going to go away, and what he had was going to go to someone that he did not know. And that was his grandchildren that he didn't know. It was also a foreign leader that he did not know. So, yeah, we just have to accept the fact that this world's been going on a lot longer than we've been here. It's going to continue to go until God says, I'm done. But it is the way it is. We just have to make our best of it while we're here, which kind of leads us to the point we said before. What do we do that stays after us is the important thing. All right, continuing on. Verse 13 and 14. Whoever's got that, go ahead and read for me. All right. All right. So who is able to straighten out something God has made crooked? What do you think he's talking about here? Do you have any, I mean, what, give me a specific, when he talks about I know he's talking about metaphorically, but think about that for just a second. What might he be talking about? What are some of the things he might be talking about? Who can make straight what God has made crooked? Okay. I mean, that's certainly a good example. And nor would it be a good idea for us to do so. The rivers are crooked for a good reason. If you made all those things straight, that water's coming straight down the pike. It'd be what would happen if that river we were on yesterday, if that thing was straight, that water would be going, 90 miles an hour down the thing. No, it can't. That didn't work. What else? All the things that God has made. Okay. The metaphorical point he's making, of course, is what God has put together. There's nothing that we can do about that. God has set things into motion. God set his plan into motion as far, when we read in the Garden of Eden, we read where God has put his plan into motion. All of the machinations of man, everything that we've ever done, if we put our collective mind to it, all 7.5 billion of us, if we all got together as if that were possible, and if we all came to the same conclusion, which would be impossible, but if all that were to occur, if every single one of us decided we're going to subvert the plans of God, what would God's reaction to that be? He'd laugh at us. He said, "You don't understand who you're dealing with. What I've put into play, what I've put into motion, you can't do anything about. It's going to happen." And the reason is not that we don't have the ability to decide and to do things for ourselves. It's that he knows our hearts better than we know. He knows what we're going to do. So he knows, you say this, but I'm telling you right now, that's not what's in your heart. What's in your heart is this, and this is what you're going to end up doing, because I know you. So that idea of, nothing that we can do, even if we all put our minds together and tried to do it, we could not stop the plans of God. What he's put together, we have no, we just sort of sit back and say, yes, sir, whatever you say. Yes, ma'am. Depending on who you talk to, it could very well apply to that. The concept, not to get into the whole science thing, because I think a lot of people agree on some things, but they disagree on how things occur and so forth and so on. But getting back to the whole point, where Peter and John are brought before the council, and Gamaliel is there, and he says, take them out for just a few moments. They take Peter and John out, and then Gamaliel speaks, and he makes this incredibly salient point. I mean, it's absolutely spot on. He says, be careful what you're about to do to these men. Just be careful. Because if this thing be from man, it's going to fall apart on its own, because it's of men. It's of men. Nothing that we do physically on this earth lasts. Nothing. As much as we would like to think that it does, it won't. Eventually it's going to fall apart because it's made by us and it's physical. He said, be careful what you're going to do, because if this thing is of men, then it's going to fall apart. And he talks about, remember a while back somebody rose up claiming to be this person, and his followers, he was killed and his followers were scattered. And then yet another man arose up, and he and his followers were killed and put to the sword. He said, be careful, because if it's of men, it's going to fall apart. But if this thing be of God, be careful lest you be found fighting against God. So that tells us what? If it's of man, there's nothing that we can do about it. If it's of man, we may have a force in it, but to be honest, it's not going to matter, because eventually it's going to fall apart anyway. It's going to be done. But it's of God. There's nothing that we can do about it. There's nothing that we can do about it. What he's put into play, what he's put into motion, can't be overthrown. It just can't be done. And Gamaliel was making a point. You could put Peter and John to the sword. You could kill them, but it's not going to kill what God. If this thing that they're telling you is from God, you can't kill it. You could try, but let me tell you, if you went around just executing members of this belief, eventually the people are going to rise up and they're going to kill you. So be careful what you do. Yes. as a long about way that it kind of answers the question. If it's natural, if it's occurring, God's put it into place. No, there's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do. We can either help him along and hitch our wagon to his star, or we sit back and be crushed underfoot, because that's what's going to happen. Those are our two choices when it comes to God's will. I'd much rather hitch my wagon to the star, because we will be crushed if we're found fighting against God. All right. So, in essence, speaking to that, it says, so no one can undo what God has done. That's the long and the short of it. You know, we're talking about these are lessons to learn from Ecclesiastes. At this point, we're just looking at lessons that we can learn, little everyday things. One, if God's put it into place, we don't need to worry about it. Nothing that man can do can overthrow that. If God has put a moral law into place, man cannot subvert that moral law. They can pass laws against speaking out against it. They can fine us. They can imprison us. They can do all of those things. They can do whatever they want to do to us. But no matter what they do, all they're doing is, the old saying, don't kill the messenger. In essence, that's what they're doing. They're killing a messenger. They're not doing anything to God's plan. God's plan is still in play. So we don't need to worry about, man's going to pass these laws and it's going to overthrow God's law. No, you can't overthrow God's law. God's law is God's law. You might as well overthrow the law of gravity to try to overthrow God's law. Yeah. No. Yeah. Yeah. Does it hurt? Yes. Because we take it personally, don't we? We take it personally when somebody says something against God, don't we? You can admit it. We do. When somebody says something hurtful about God, uses his name in vain, curses him, says vile things about God, it used to bother me when I'd see somebody, well, you worship a bloodthirsty, hateful, racist, blah, 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 whatever God. I used to get kind of offended. Well, how dare you talk about my God? And I realized, look, better people than me have died in his service. For me to get really bent out of shape because some ignorant person says something ugly about God, I'm kind of boxing against the wind, because people have always done that. They've always done that. From the beginning of time, people have done that against God. God doesn't really need me to defend him. He's perfectly capable of doing that himself. He says, what I want you to do is I want you to obey me. I want you to try to reach these people, but if they won't listen to you, guess what? They're not, as he told Samuel, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. That's for me. Vengeance is mine, I will repay. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Is that hard? Yeah, it's very hard. Because what we want to do is we want to defend God. We want to defend his laws. We want to do all this stuff. He doesn't need us to do that. That's not what he wants us to do. He said, seek and save the lost, and keep yourself close to me. Those are the only two things I ask you to do. That's it. And like I said, the world can pass laws. The world can reject him. The society can go off the rails, which it has done on occasion. And even if it comes back on, it's going to do it again. That's just the way the world is. But we don't need to worry about that. We just need to continue doing what we're supposed to be doing. Live quiet lives in service to him. That's it. That's it. If we do that, everything else is going to take care of itself. If we believe what he tells us. See, this is the other problem. This gets into the idea, how many Christians really believe what he says? I mean, you'd be surprised. How many members of the Lord's church haven't quite given themselves over to that belief yet, that he is going to do what he says he's going to do, and for us not to worry. And we always do that. Yeah, but, and we keep wanting to, but. And God's up there saying, but me no buts. Don't worry about that. I've got this. You just do what I tell you to do. It's like, have you ever worked a job where there's always somebody that thinks they know better than the person in charge? Have you ever worked a job like that? And what do they always want to do? They always interject themselves, and then after they've made a hash out of everything, after they've just completely, messed everything up, the person in charge steps in and says, if you just done what I told you to do, everything would have been fine. Well, we got to be careful about not doing that as well. Okay. All right. Real quick, verses 15 through 18. Here's some down-to-earth practical wisdom right here. 15 through 18, Brother William.
Okay.
15 through 18.
It is good that you rest and also not remove your hand from others. For he who fears God will escape them all.
Okay. All right. A little bit of everyday wisdom in his. I think there's a lot more maybe than we even realize. Solomon here makes another plea to the people to listen to him. And his plea is this: I have seen everything in my days of vanity. I've seen it all. I've seen it all. Have you ever listened to some old grizzled old man that has been everywhere and seen everything and done everything? You know, they fought in the war. They served as a longshoreman. They roped cattle, and they've done. It seems like they've been everywhere and done everything. And it's like, man, I can't wait to hear this guy talk, because he's going to tell us all this stuff. He's going to give us all these stories. Solomon here is saying, listen, I've been everywhere and I've done everything. I've seen everything, at least it seems. I've seen the wickedness of man. I've seen great things done. I've seen the power of God. I've seen what money can do, both good and bad, all of these things. And when Solomon says this, he's saying this at first so that we'll pay close attention to what he says after. It's kind of like the old man saying, listen to me, because back when I was, shelling the Germans in such and such. You're going to listen to what comes next, because he's about to tell you something really neat. Okay? Here's what Solomon is saying. I've seen everything, so listen to me. There is a just man who perishes in his righteousness. What does that mean? Some people die, some righteous people die before their time, or what we call their time. They die young. They die early. We talk about our friend up in Woodstock. He's 62 years old. Died of a freak accident. Shouldn't have happened. He wasn't doing anything that we know of. He wasn't doing anything foolish. Nobody intentionally did something to him. It was an accident. He fell off the back of a truck while performing his job. Nothing that should have occurred, but it did. And he was a righteous man. He was a good man, Christian man who was faithful, and we can be confident where he is right now. But it doesn't change the fact that he died before what we would consider to be his time, whatever that means. But he also says, I've seen people, decent people, good people, God-fearing people, die in their righteousness. They've died young, they've died before their time, but they've died in the service of God. They've died as righteous individuals. When it says righteous, it doesn't mean while they were doing something righteous. It means that they died while they were young and close to God. What about that 16-year-old that died while handing out tracts for church, for the fellowship, for the gospel meeting? 16 years old, hit and run accident, killed her, injured her mom. Now, this is exactly what he's talking about. There is a just man who perishes in his righteousness. But he also says this. He said, just to show there's nothing that you can count on as far as this world is concerned. He said, and then there's a wicked man who prolongs life in his wickedness. Someone who is far removed from God, far removed from righteousness, but lives a long life in all of his prosperity. And, he dies, and he dies a wealthy person. And that wealth just goes over to somebody else, his son. It's almost like Solomon is being having a little bit of foresight, because we see what's going to happen after the divided kingdom. How many kings of the north were listed as good? The kings of Israel. How many kings were good in Israel? None. Not one. Not one good king in Israel. His son Jeroboam, as he flees up there and establishes this northern kingdom, not one decent king. Not one. And even in Judah, there were only about 4 or 5 that could be, some were mostly good. Most of them were bad. Some of the worst ones were in Judah. Some of them didn't last very long, but most of them were not good kings. They were bad people. They shouldn't have done the things that they did. But there were 2 or 3 good ones, but not that many. So it's almost like Solomon saying, look, I see what's going to happen. I've seen it all, and this is what happens. There are good people who die young, and then there are wicked people who live a long life, and they do whatever they want. But this is interesting. Do not be overly righteous, nor be overly wise. Why should you destroy yourself? What do you think he's saying here? That's an interesting. Talk about an interesting turn of phrase. What do you think he's talking about here? How can a person be too righteous or too wise? What's the warning here? Is it a warning against being wise? Okay. Remember what Felix told Paul? He says, your great learning has driven you mad. That was Felix's attitude towards Paul. Paul was speaking, and he was speaking with this distilled truth. It was just the truth in its purest form. Felix couldn't handle it. He thought that Paul was insane. He says, your great learning has driven you mad. You're not in your right mind anymore. Kind of what Solomon's talking about here is he's not saying that you necessarily can be too wise. There's a warning here against the idea of religious conceit or legalism. You've heard the term legalism referred to in religious ideas. What's legalism as far as the religious philosophy is concerned? What's legalism? Okay, the Pharisees were legalistic, but what does it mean? Okay, there was a conceit, the idea of religious conceit. I am righteous, and I am more righteous than you. Now, are there variations of righteousness? Can one person be more righteous than another person be righteous? Is that even such a thing? Righteousness is righteousness, right? Righteous, right? Okay. If someone is right with God, is somebody else more right with God? No. Right. So a person that's right with God is right with God. Yeah. And the idea of a level of righteousness. I don't know how many times, and I know some people in the church do it, and they say it's a joke, and we kind of laugh back and forth. But I don't know how many times I've had somebody say, just from out the world, Pastor, could you pray for me? I know you've got an in with the man upstairs. And I kind of chuckle to myself, and I have to set them right. I can't let them walk away thinking that's true. I said, listen, the prayers of a righteous person avail. I'm no more righteous than anybody else. I'm either right with God or I'm not right with God. But this concept of somehow I'm more righteous than them because I'm a minister, I don't know where they get that from. I know they get it from the world, but I'm not sure where that all came about. What makes me more righteous than anybody else? But that's what Solomon's warning about. When he says don't be too wise, he's not saying don't gain wisdom. He's saying don't allow this to color your attitude towards somebody else. Or lets people see that so that it colors their attitude towards you. You're right about the Pharisees being legalistic. They were self-righteous. And self-righteous means simply that. They viewed themselves as righteous. Not that anybody else did. Unfortunately, everybody else did. Everybody else gave them a level of respect that they were not entitled to. They didn't deserve. Why didn't they deserve it? How do we know they didn't deserve it? Somebody says, how do we know they didn't deserve it? What did Jesus say? Okay, but how do we know that Jesus didn't consider? How do we know that Jesus didn't consider them more righteous? What did he call them? Hypocrites, whitewashed tombs. That's what it. Yeah. Okay. I knew we could get it out of you. I'm pulling it out slowly. I'm pulling it out. So were they more righteous than anybody else? No. Were they self-righteous? Who gave them that feeling of self-righteousness? Themselves. That's what Solomon's warning against here. Exactly. Exactly. God does not view me as more righteous. I view myself as more righteous, and that's the warning that Solomon is giving. See, those verses can be very confusing, because we think, why would we not want to be more righteous? We can't be more righteous, can we? We are either righteous or we're not. It's like an off-on switch. I'm not more righteous than you are. We're either righteous or we're not. So that's what Solomon is saying here. Don't allow that. Don't get that that sense of self. Don't allow yourself to think of as being more righteous than anybody else or more wise. Is there anything more insufferable than a know-it-all? I've been around it now. I hate to say it, and you may agree with me. Sometimes I've found myself acting like a know-it-all, and I have to tell myself to cut it out, or Heather tells me to cut it out. Okay, that's why you get married. So people who aren't afraid of hurting your feelings will tell you what you need to hear. That's perfectly okay. That's all right. And I have to say, you know what? I probably was. I've got a lot of knowledge on a couple of subjects, and when those subjects come up, what do I want to do? I want to talk about them, kind of show off how much I know about this particular thing. But I got to be careful, because what does that do to somebody? It turns them off. They don't want to talk to me. They don't want to, oh gosh, here comes Chuck. I bet she's going to want to talk about blah blah blah. They don't want to have anything to do with me. Well, I got to be careful. I don't want people to think that way. If you ever find me being a know-it-all, tell me to knock it off. My wife does, so I'm certainly not going to take offense at it. But we have to be careful, and that's what Solomon is getting at here. Don't think too highly of yourself. Don't engage in legalism. The Pharisees used to be able to, they could take a word, and they would just twist that word every which way until it hollered, so that they could better explain it to the people who were ignorant of the law, and they were legalistic. If the Bible says this particular thing, that it means this, no more than this, no less than this, this only. And what did they do? They said they parsed the words, but the intent of them was lost to them. Yeah, it's like being able to quote the dictionary, but not being able to understand the dictionary or explain it to somebody else. So there's a big difference there. All right, continue. No, we're going to stop there. All right. I will ask one more question really quick. Why do the righteous sometimes suffer and the wicked sometimes prosper? Well, the wicked tend to do whatever it takes, right? They'll say or do anything that they need to in order to improve their situation. No, he's not. No, he's not. Which cuts both ways, doesn't it? It cuts both coming and going. When he talks about he's not a respecter of persons, it means he's not a respecter of our person. If we sin and fall short, he doesn't look at us just, well, he's been a member of the church for 30 years. I'm going to overlook that. That's not the way it works. He's not a respecter of our person either. If we are a Christian and we go back into sin, we are no better or no worse. Actually, we're worse off than someone who has never come to an understanding of the truth at all. He tells us that. No, God is no respecter of persons. But the righteous person oftentimes will give up an opportunity to improve their situation because they have a sense of integrity. They have a sense of loyalty to truth and to ethics that the wicked person doesn't have. And they may lose out. I love looking at those. I love looking at those stories where, the homeless person or the trash can guy or whoever it is, they find a pocketbook with, $5,000. Instead of taking it, they turn it in. They get it right to the right person. And those stories always make me feel good, because I think basically human nature is like that. I really do. I'm not quite that nihilistic yet. I still believe that people are like that. But once again, they've missed out on a chance to prosper physically, but they've prospered spiritually far greater than anything that the money would have bought them anyway. So, all right, we'll finish up chapter 17 next week, and then we'll get into 7. You know what I meant. 7. We'll finish up 7 next week, and then we'll get into chapter 8. Hopefully next week as well. We don't have much left in chapter 7. Okay. Any other questions, comments, smart remarks? Okay. You lost your chance. We have a song of invitation. It's been set aside for us. If anyone here needs the prayers of the group that's gathered here tonight, we want to pray for you and with you, whatever needs you might have. There's a lot of stuff going on in our lives, and sometimes it gets to a point where we throw up our hands and say, I need some help. We want to help if we can. There might be someone here who's fallen out of favor with God. They've left that relationship, and they need to restore that relationship in as much as it's in their power to do so. And if there's anyone here who does need the prayers of the congregation in any way, come while we stand and while we sing.